Hey everybody, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth. As always, with some ideas and insights what to pay attention to when you are getting ready to scale. Now, it's an important question to ask because it's when you think about how do you transition from tactical delegation to transformative leadership, because that's the whole question when you're thinking about scaling, getting out of the driver's seat in your business. It's not about starting. All of you are good at starting because that's generally what CEOs do best. It's about the fun, the adrenaline, the chaos, the action. But the road to success, when we're talking about scaling and growth, is very, very different. So this is where we have to get clear about the skill set needed to take the business from that first kind of basic level to where it's actually scalable, sustainable, repeatable, predictable. A lot of those words are super, super boring to entrepreneurs. So this is where if you want to be successful in this phase of business, you have to acquire a new skill set. Because the dream for a lot of you is, oh, I'll just hire a director of operation. I just hire a COO. I just hire somebody who can take care of the operational aspects so I can just focus on the fun part. But what I've learned over time is that the CEOs who first become good COOs, as in they're good at the operational part, but then they transition out of that just at the right part, they make the best leaders of a company that can actually grow because they understand what it takes, but they're not getting stuck there. So you have the great skill to get the company started, but now we need to add the great skill of can you actually lead? The problem for a lot of smaller businesses is, you can easily get to that 1 million plus mark, and then the problems start happening. And then with that generally goes that at that point you start having more than a handful, like the 3 to 5 employees. That's also when things seriously start falling apart, because it's pretty easy to keep your sticky little fingers on a handful of people. But if it goes to more than that, that's when it gets really tricky, because at that point it's the only way it works is if you're not managing the people. You need a system that manages the people, and then you manage the system. So without that, there's just tons of stuff that'll fall through the gaps. So the shift that needs to happen, and that's a shift in your mind and a shift in your heart, it's a really a big, big shift in your thinking, is you have to go from that tactical and operational focus to much more strategic leadership. And look, the good news is leadership can be learned. For a lot of people, it's something that they come by, trial and error, experience, training. And, when you think about what does it cost to learn this by trial and error, it's going to take a ton of your time, money, and energy to work like that. So when you want to grow, you must include this skill set into your CEO tool chest, because otherwise it will not work. So when you think about the basic idea of leadership, what is leadership? It just basically means you're shifting to getting stuff done by you to getting stuff done through you, right? So it's really where work and results happen through you instead of by you. So, and the big difference also in your thinking is this is also not where you get the work done by yourself with assistance of other people. It's much more about how do you actually empower other people to completely own the entire process, project, business area, functional business area, whatever it is. But that's a huge, huge difference. So you have to think about, what will it take for you if you're in this place where you're still getting a lot of work done yourself with the assistance of others, how can you get to a place where you're truly out of the driver's seat and your team absolutely takes care of growing the business for you? So you got to think about, what does it take for me, for you specifically, to get there? And what I've come to is there are 10 principles that you absolutely cannot live without. The first one is you always need crystal clear communication in place. And that is that big clarity aspect, because when you're not clear, they're not clear, right? So they can't read your mind. You got to be able to communicate your goals and expectations in a crystal clear way. So that means who's responsible, what are the end results that I'm looking for, what are the key steps to get there, right? Because again, they can't read your mind, so you have to give them at least the roadmap, the guidelines for how you want to get there, but also what's really, really important is what's the end destination. So that's number one. Number two is, at this point, at this phase in your business, when you're truly looking to grow and scale, planning must take precedence over doing. And that might sound crazy, because in your mind, doing is all that matters, because how are you going to get money in the bank? It's by doing. Yes, but there's an organic stop and limit and ceiling to that. So now planning has to take precedence over doing. So that means, early on, you have to kind of go as you can, take things as they come, shoot from the hip. And that's an exciting way to operate in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of action. And so it becomes a hard pattern to break, because chemically what happens is every time you run around like a chicken with your head cut off, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, it creates adrenaline, it creates dopamine. There's all these cool brain chemicals that start happening that literally get you addicted to drama, to chaos, to these heightened levels of emotion, whether they're good and bad, as it shows up in your life. But it is a really, really hard pattern to break, because in your mind, a lot of times it translates to, this is exciting and this is fun. And it feels like you're getting a lot done, but it's actually just that you're busy, you're in action, you're moving around, but are you actually being effective, right? So that is where the big difference happens, because when you start planning, it means you're going into this key learning area that moves you from a startup, even if you've been in business for 20 years, but you're still operating like one. So you're going from that startup mentality where everything is kind of, flying by the seat of your pants, to being a grown-up company where you are strategic in the way you approach things. And just like many major moves, this absolutely takes time. So when you get into a planning mode, it really determines your ability to grow, because now you as the CEO, you're determining what needs to happen over the how. So so far it's all been over the how. So now we actually have to look at the what as the much more important qualifier here. So that's number two, is get to a place where you're emphasizing planning over doing. Now, the third point is we need to reorganize the intentional internal structure. So a lot of times what happens is it's you and the people. And that also means that you are the hub of everything, of all the information, of all the action, everything is centralized around you. So this can't be the case anymore. Now, what are you going to do? So we have to reorganize your structure. Now that means, okay, first, you got to clear about what the roles are that you really need in place so that you can grow this company. So that means, who are my right people on the bus? But first we have to figure out what the seats are that everybody's going to sit in, because you cannot fill those seats with the right people if the seats aren't clearly defined. It's like you're getting on the plane and it's Southwest Airlines and it's a free for all and nobody knows where they're going to sit, right? So we need to make sure that you know what roles you really need to make sure that you can serve your business at the highest level possible. So that next part means we need really, really clear job descriptions, because that's what defines what everybody's ownership is, what their responsibility is, what they actually need to produce. So we need the wish list, we need the clear job descriptions, and then we need really clearly defined standards, performance measure, culture, everything that really sets that tone for, hey, how do we show up? Why are we here? And who are we? So reorganizing your structure. Number 4 is we got to get those 3 levels of delegation in place. And if you haven't heard me talk about it, go back a couple of episodes, find the episode where we talk about what that really means. Because when you're new to business, or if you've always just been the operator, you probably can't delegate. You probably don't know how to do it right. And to grow, you cannot not know how to delegate. You have to figure this piece out, because again, we have to shift from a place where the work doesn't happen by you, it needs to happen through you. So you cannot really grow until you mature in a way where your leadership takes priority over everything else. So you're still the operator until you figure out this piece of how do you get work done through others. And that doesn't just mean handing out tasks. It means building a self-managing, self-led team that can build you a self-managing company, which is the only practice that can help you to have the freedom and the results that you're looking for. So got to get those 3 levels of delegation in place. Now, number 5 is, and you know this, there's no doing anything without having the right people on the bus. So you've already thought about this when you thought about your restructure. Well, what does this business really need, right? So think about, you have to be properly staffed at all levels. So if you really need 3 people, but you only have 2, well, that means those 2 people are going to be totally overworked. They're not going to do an amazing job. They're not going to have the time to be strategic. So you have to be strategic as a CEO to look at that and go, to really do this properly, we need 3 people. Now, when you have 5 people where you need 3, you have a problem, because now you're paying far too many people and you're wasting resources. So you have to make sure that every business area is properly staffed at all times. So look at what the business really needs, come up with those clear job description, and then always be in the hiring and training mode. Because when you think about this, like when you need somebody and you're starting to hire, you're too late. You've probably needed this person for quite a while. So to get the right people on the bus, the people who fit your culture, who are a fit for all your its, like they have the capacity to do it, they get it, they want it, they need it, they've got all the makings for the right team member for you who can help you take this company to success. It's just like, falling in love first time you see somebody. It doesn't happen that often. You're going to have to date and kiss a bunch of frogs before you get to the place where you recognize the right person in your seat there. So always be hiring, because you always want to be on the lookout for who's our next all-star player. And once you get somebody who's got the right DNA, and this might not even be somebody who's got all the skill set yet, but they've got all the other it's in place, right? They have all the other skills, they have all the other attributes. That also means you have to not just hire them, but then you have to train them, you have to give them feedback, you have to mentor them, you have to make sure that you give them the systems, the processes, and the leadership that they need so they can actually knock it out of the park for you. So it's not just enough to hire the right people. So, and when you think about, what makes a really big difference for a lot of business owners is the mentality of, look, you need to hire. You're going to make mistakes. Most business owners aren't very good at hiring because they don't do it very often. It's not like you're a headhunter who hires, hundreds of people every single month. This is not something that you practice a whole lot. So you're gonna make mistakes. Even when you have great systems in place, some people are just very good at interviewing. They're really good at telling you a story, and then they won't show up. Now, with our structures and systems, generally we know this beforehand, but sometimes this happens. So that means people get gun shy at firing and at hiring. So one of the highest expenses that most business owners have is keeping the wrong people on the bus for too long. And a lot of times that happens is because you need bodies, you need to get the work done. You're not spending the time to have your pipeline full with the right culture fits and the right people, the right experience fits. So you end up with this person who's barely doing the job, who might actually be costing you money, who might be poisoning the well with the rest of your team, and you don't feel like you can make a move because you got to get this stuff done, and their little tiny bit of input is better than nothing. But again, this costs your company a ton of money, of resources, of momentum, can cost you the culture. So that's where we always want to go back to hire slow and fire fast, which right now it seems like the opposite for many people. So make sure you have your pipeline full of people you want to hire. And when somebody is not working out, pull the plug. Have the right measures in place so that you can, with confidence, say, hey, this is the right person or this is the wrong person. And if it's the wrong person, make a move. You're doing both of you a favor. So that was number 5, making sure that you're always properly staffed, that you have a great team in place. And then, we have the right people. Okay, now we need to give them the right focus, and that is high performance focus. As a business owner, to win, you always have to pretty much go where you have to focus on creating more output with less input. So it's always about increasing revenue while you're lowering costs. Like a lot of business owners think that growing the business means more sales. Well, more sales is a great idea, but that only makes sense if you can actually manage your costs. So if your profit margin is a real problem, fix that first before you fix the sales. So making sure that you increase your revenue while you lower your cost. And, to do that, you can go back to Brian Tracy's teaching of the 3 R's, which is reorganization, re-engineering, and restructuring, right? So we talked about reorganization already. Re-engineering is how you do stuff. Is your business model still the right way? Are you doing everything you can to be the most profitable? And then restructuring is making sure that you have the right levels in place so that you can make sure that everything gets carried out the best way possible. So that's number 6. Number 7 is setting standards that produce visible action. So when you think about, this goes back to culture, when you think about how do people show up in your company? Well, they're going to show up the way you show up. So you are the one who is setting standards at all times. You are always leading by example because the way you behave, the way you show up, they're going to look at that. And when you're a company that's value driven, that's customer focused, you need to deliver at a super high standard, and that is probably part of your mission. So that means you have to commit to excellence, and that means also your team has to commit to excellence. So that means all of you have to be really open to feedback from each other. So when you set really high standards, that doesn't just mean for the team, that also means for you. And one of our practices that we recommend is where the CEO asks his or her team for, hey, what's some feedback that you can give me so you can do a better job for me? What can I do, right? So actually actively asking for feedback that helps the CEO be a better leader. And of course, we got to do that the other way, where, this is always about managing up and managing down. So your team has to be able to receive feedback and take it constructively, implement it, and be coachable, because we always want to be getting better. So that's number 7, setting standards. And then 8 is focusing on priorities, of course. And that means you have to be able to make sure that whatever you do, all your projects end up in completion. You'd be amazed how many business owners I talk to who are doing a great job delivering the service or the product, and then they don't bill, or they bill and it stops there. They're not even clear if they got paid. So they're suffering with all these cash flow problems, but they didn't even do what they needed to do to get the money in. So whatever your workflows are, really important that you know what are the priorities, right? What's the one thing that everything is dependent on that you must get done, and making sure that that gets seen through from start to end. And that's also something that you want to train your team on, because one of the complaints that I hear over and over is like, unless I follow up all day long, I don't even know what's happening in my company. I feel like I have to constantly follow up, ask people what the status of affairs, where things are, what projects are still not completed. I don't get to know about the mistakes people making, or where we get stuck, or whatever it is, right? So you are constantly in a paranoid state of, I don't know what's happening in my company. Now, that's pretty easy to fix without micromanaging the heck out of everybody. And that's like, we teach our clients how to set up a CEO report from their teams, where their teams at the end of the week, everybody submits a short but very specific and structured report to the business owner that says, hey, where are all the projects? What's going great? What am I struggling with? Where do I need help? And that is a huge piece of gold here, because when you get that from everybody on your team, not only do you know where things are at, where you need to pay attention, where they need help from you, you will also know what's important to put into your leadership, into your team meeting for the next week that everybody needs to know about. So we have that cross collaboration. But you'll also know who to pull aside and have a little one-on-one little chat with, because there's something that's going on with them specifically that needs to be addressed one-on-one. So this serves in a multitude of ways. So making sure that you know how to focus on priorities, and that's something that gets communicated. And that should also be something that is the focus of your WAR meetings, your weekly action review meetings, because if you're not doing that, what are you doing? So, and then of course, number 9 is all about how resourceful are you as a leader? How resourceful are you as a culture? Because generally, we know that there's always challenges in business, no matter what you do. I mean, we're all in the business of solving challenges. The only question is, how fast can you do it? Because you got to figure out, hey, what's between you and your goal? What's that challenge, and how fast can you overcome it? So, and there's 2 different ways to look at challenges. Are they internal or are they external? Internal challenges are actually the ones that are much harder to address, because this means usually it's something in you, in your identity, in the way you show up, and also the same for your team, that's preventing you from showing up and executing, operating at the level your business needs you to. So uncovering those can be a lot of work. So this is something, if you don't do it, it's like doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So you got to hold yourself accountable and make sure that you have that practice where you get resourceful and you look at, what are my challenges to get to that next level? And of course, external challenges are oftentimes the challenges that you have only a limited amount of control over. So you have to really look at, what are things we can control, and how are we going to do that the best way possible? And what we cannot control, well, what do we do internally so we can deal with it, so we can address it, so we can work around it, right? If you address those two things, you are in a really, really good place. And then lastly, always be improving. Because when you're looking at what happens if you have anybody on your team who's plateauing, who's stagnating, it means basically the death of your business if that happens in multiple places, because that means suddenly we're slowing down, we're declining. So we always want to look at, what are the strategies we have to embrace that will keep us growing, that will keep us innovating, that will keep us getting better. So when you think about just from a perspective of time and effort, probably about 20% of your time should be dedicated towards R&D. So you can always look at, how can we do this even better? How can we innovate? How can we lower costs? Because if you don't do this, well, probably also means you're going to be unhappy. Your clients are going to be unhappy. You're going to stagnate at some point and you're going to fail. So those are really, really important. Success really comes from being clear about the results that you want and what actions lead to the results. And if you want to win, you have to do that with a strong sense of urgency. Because to win in this business climate, you have to be decisive and committed. As in, decisive means, you got to be sick and tired of whatever the status you're currently in, and you got to do whatever it takes to get to the next level. And part of that also means being coachable, as in knowing your way's not working, being willing to empty your cup, show up, do things differently. Because if you're not willing to do things differently, you might as well stop talking about it, because it's wasting everybody's time. And then, of course, the resourceful item that I mentioned, where no matter what the challenge, you're always willing to show up, get resourceful, dig deep, and get around the challenge so that you can still get to your dream. So those are the 10 steps to absolutely pay attention to when you want to get in growth mode. You can't miss a single one of them. So I hope you wrote this down. You got this all mapped out so that you can actually sit down and figure out what does that mean for you. The most important part is doing it. So I hope this helps. If you want more help, you want more insight, we just have a brand new training out there that addresses all this in detail. So go to bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, and check out our new training and implement. Do it. All right, we'll see you next week.